Good evening, and it's once again a schus and a pleasure. So I've been giving many shiurim recently, but I think the Aguda has precedence and probably more than any other organization. More than any organization, I think more shiurim to the Yarchei Kallah of Aguda than to anyone else, but Baruch Hashem, it's a great schus for me and a pleasure as well. I just walked into this room. This is my office in the Kallah, and that's why I was wearing a mask as I came in. And let me just apologize and shut off my phones because I just walked in. So it's a pleasure once again to be together with all of you. And
what is this going to be on?
Shlomo, I hear some background noise. Is that from me or from you? I don't hear you, Shlomo. You're muted.
It's good. No, it's good. It's good. It's good.
Okay, it's good now. Now there's no voice anymore. We've eliminated it. Apologize.
Okay, so Baruch Hashem, we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the ability to be Marbitz Torah in these difficult, tragic times. And so it's just a sentiment that I've shared with many people. There's a Gemara about Yesod of Gimel. And the Gemara talks about Achras Hayamim, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu will come and judge all the nations. And the Gemara says the first ones to be judged are the Romans and then the Greeks. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will say, what have you done for my people? And the Romans will say, we build bridges, we build huge monuments and great halls and amphitheaters. V'kol ma she'osinu lo osinu elo b'shvil Yisrael. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will say, shoitem shebi'olam, kol ma she'asisem b'shvil atzmechem asisem. And the same will repeat itself when the Greeks will be judged. And those are the huge, massive, powerful empires of yore, the Roman Empire and the ancient Greeks. And one comes to wonder, that will be the end of days when HaKadosh Baruch Hu will appear with all his glory and majesty. And how would they dare to lie in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kiviyachol? And they will say, we did this for Israel, for your people. And when HaKadosh Baruch Hu will respond and say, Shoitem shebi'olam, kol ma she'asisem b'shvil atzmechem asisem, why doesn't he say, you are liars, not only fools? So I think the pshat is very simple. At the end of days, we will all see that everything was b'shvil Yisrael. Yes. Those buildings, those huge sports stadiums will turn into yeshivas and koilalim, and everything will ultimately work out to be lechvoid shemayim. And that is what the Romans and the Greeks will say at the end of the day. Whatever we did was for you. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will say, Shoitem shebi'olam, what was your intention? Yes, ultimately everything is for me, but that is of my doing, not yours. And you deserve no benefit out of that fact. What was your intention? And you tormented my people, and you killed them, and that's why they will be judged. So we talk a lot about modern technology, and modern technology is a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge for the chinuch of our children. But in a way, in days like these days, Baruch Hashem, we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the ability to use modern technology to enhance Talmud Torah. And it is a great schus. So Baruch Hashem, I'm happy once again to be together with you. And the topic we will be discussing today is Berchas HaNehenen. And I think that the one that chose these topics, and I think probably that is our dear friend, HaRav Shlomo, I think this is the best choice possible because we are dealing with the fundamentals of Avodas Hashem. And this is a time we all have more time than we usually have, and this is a time to come back to the fundamentals and the yesod of avodas Elokim and avodas Hashem. So we spoke about tefillah, we spoke about Kriyat Shema, and now we're dealing with Berchus Hanahanan. And I explained many times, so when I'm not learning in my kollel or in other kollelim and yeshivas, and I'm not confined to a certain sugi, I always prefer to dealing with sugyas that touch upon many, many sources, and not only one limited sugya, and we'll do the same today. So the fundamental source is in Brochas Daf Lamed Hey. How do we know that people need to say Berchus Hanahanan? And the Gemara says, Svarei, Osela Odom Lehenois Miolam Hazeh Beli Brocha. Pure Svara. So first the Gemara wants to learn a Kallah v'chaimer, and the Gemara rejects the Kallah v'chaimer. Svarei, Oseli Odom Shien Yolam Hazeh Beli Brocha. And then the Gemara says, Kol Hanahanim Yolam Hazeh Beli Brocha, Kilo Goizel Es HaMokayim. So is it a mitzvah d'oraisa or a mitzvah d'Rabbanan? On one hand, we know all the brachas are midrabbanan. There's only one bracha that lekuli alm is min haTorah, and one more bracha that is according to Rav Poskim min haTorah. The only bracha that is beyond doubt min haTorah is Berchus Hamazon, Mikra Molei Diber HaKosa, V'yochalto v'savoto v'varachto v'Hashem Elokecha. The other one, that according, I think most Rishonim maintain its min haTorah's Berchus HaTorah. And the Gemara on Brachas learns it from the Pasuk, Ki Shem Hashem Ekra, Havu Goidel LaElokeinu. So there is a Yerushalmi in Brachas Daf Mem Aleph, and the Yerushalmi learns Berchus HaMitzvah from Berchus HaTorah. Ve'etno lacho es lochois ha'oven ha'Torah v'ha'mitzvah iskish mitzvah l'Torah. So some Achronim maintain that according to the Yerushalmi, Berchus HaMitzvah min haTorah, but the Pri Megadim, and I think he's definitely right, learns that that's an asmachta. All the Berchus Hanahanan, besides Berchus Hamazon, and the Berchus HaMitzvah, and the Berchus HaShvach, are all midrabanan. But the question is why? Twice in Shas do we find a lashon, an expression, lama likra svarei. Ksubas Chav Beis, Omed Aleph, and Bava Kama Mem Vav Omed Beis. What are these two sugyas dealing with? So Ksubas Chav Beis Omed Aleph, the Gemara asks, how do we know the din of migo? Hapeh she'osar, hu hapeh shehitir. Well-known sugya, all familiar with. So how do we know the din of migo? And the Gemara says, Es bitinu sati leish hazeh. When a father says, Es bitinu sati osra. When he says, Leish hazeh, hitira. Because if he is the one that was Mekadesh, this girl, then all the others are mutar, b'kroi voiseha. And so it is from here that we learn migo. And then the Gemara says, Lama likra svarei. It's pure logic. We don't need a pasuk. Bava kama mem vava mid beis. Chazal deal with the most yesodis the halacha and dina momenis. The most fundamental halacha in dina momenis is hamoitzi machaveroi olav araya. I think in modern legal language, it is the benefit of doubt. And Lashon Kodesh, haschut lehenot min hasafek. And that is most fundamental in every legal system when we're dealing with monetary issues. And the Gemara once again asks, how do we know this halacha? And the Gemara brings a posuk in Bava Kama Memvav Amud Beis, Mi Bal Dvorim Yigashalai. And then the Gemara asks, Lama likra svarei. So obviously, svara is min haTorah, to the extent that the Gemara says, we don't need a posuk. You're bringing a pasuk, but there's no need. It's pure svara. So if the Gemara says, Svarei osala odem lahenes me'olam hazeh beli brocha, so why isn't it min haTorah? I said twice in Shas that we find the lashon lama likra svara. Actually, it's 3 times in Shas, and that's a nida chof hayom medalef. But if you will notice the significance of one word of Chazal, but there's no stam word in Chazal. Nothing is just there without a reason. So in Nida Chof Hayom Medalef, the Gemara says, Lama likra svara ba'almai. Not svara, but svara ba'alma. So I don't have time to go into many details because usually on many studies, we don't have the privilege to go into details. But In the sugya, in Midad of Chokei, it's different. So the Gemara deals there, Shilya, is it Metamet Tumas Leid, is it not Tumas Leid? And the Gemara differentiates, is the liquid pure? Is it Salul or is it Ochur? And the Gemara says if it's Ochur, then obviously there was a fetus there, but the fetus disintegrated. And that's why the water is Ochur. And then the Gemara says, Svara ba'almi. So that is not a svara of logic. It is just a mitzias. It's just a reality. We know that there was a fetus in this shilya. So that stands apart. And that is why the Gemara Nida says svara ba'almi and not lama likros svara. But I'm coming back to the fundamental question. These two sugyas prove that svara is minat Torah. Bava Kama Memvov regarding Hamoitzi Mechaveri Olav Araya, Ksubas Chav Beis regarding Hapesha Osar, Hu Hapesha Hitio. So on Brochas Lamed Hey regarding Berchas Anan, the Gemara says Svori, and nevertheless it's only Midrabanan. Sugya number 5. After I quoted our Sugya, Brochas Lamed Hey, Ksubas Bava Kama Nida, Sanhedrin Ayin Beis. And the Gemara deals with the Gimel Avedas Chamura Shebet Torah. Their din is Yehereg Va'al Yavor. Avodah Zorah Gili Arayas, we learn from Sukkim. And then the Gemara says, how do we know Shvichas Domim is Yehereg Va'al Yavor? Sorry. My chozes the Dome de Dach Sumaktfei, Dilme Dome di Dei Sumaktfei. So how do we know a person can't kill another to save his own life? And the Gemara says, we don't need Exeris Akosa. We don't need to learn this from a posik. It's a svara. Why do you think your blood is redder than another's? So once again, this halacha is definitely minat Torah. There cannot be a drabanan yehereg v'al yavar. So this sugya proves once again svara's minat Torah. So how could berchas anahanim be midrabanan? So let me just, this is just a touch of the kiyus. So in Shavuos Chav Beis Amid Beis, Shavuos Chav Beis Amid Beis is one of the many sources in Shas in which we find an interesting expression. Iboyes ei mekra, iboyes ei mesvara. So Chazal sometimes teach a halacha. And how do we know this halacha? And Chazal say, we know this halacha either from a posuk or from a svara. Either or, could be both. And Tosfos asks, so what do you mean iboyes ei mekra, iboyes ei mesvara? And in other sources, the Gemara says, lama likra svara. So when you have a svara, the posuk is unnecessary. So how come in these sugyas, the Gemara says, we both have a svara and a source in Mikra HaKodesh? So Tosfos says in Shavuos Chav Beis, I do not recall that this Tosfos appears elsewhere in Shas. Tosfos says, sometimes there is a svara, but the svara is not so obvious, it's not so self-evident, it's not so poshet, and we need a posuk to teach us this svara. So what we learn from Tosfos is, yes, sometimes Chazal do say a svara, but the svara is somewhat questionable. And maybe that would also be miyashav the kasha. But if Chazal say it's a svara, then why wouldn't it be minat Torah? But I think this answer would not be reasonable enough to me. Adayin tzorechiyun. So Tosfos just means to explain when the Gemara does say iboyes ei mekra, iboyes ei mesafara. But when Chazal just say svara, that svara should be a found svara, a solid svara. So why isn't it minat Torah? So what I want to say is a very fundamental svara. We're dealing with svara, so I'm also saying a svara. And I don't know whether I'm saying two different svaras or two different sides of the same coin, and they actually are the same svara, just two different ways to express it. I think there's a difference. There is svaras haseichel and svaras haleiv. Sometimes the svara is what the ancient Greeks would call logika, pure logic. And sometimes the svara is based on your conscience and your moral feelings. And I think that's the difference. So when the Gemara says, that's pure logic, pure logic. And that is why this is a fundamental principle, which is fundamental in every legal system, in every modern, decent legal system. You cannot damage or hurt a person's rights unless you have definitive proof to do so. And a person has the benefit of doubt. So you cannot punish a person or diminish his rights or take away his money unless you are thoroughly convinced and you have proof to do so. That is pure logic. So the Gemara says, you don't need a pasuk. It's lama likra, svarehi. The same applies to migo. Pesha osar hua pesha iter. So if a woman cousin says, Eishes isho yisi v'gerusha ani, so it defies logic, goes against the sechel yashar. So you will believe her that she was an Eishes ish, you won't believe her that she is divorced? No, I mean, whatever you know just because she says so. So it's pure logic that when a person comes in court and he says, I took a loan from this gentleman and I repaid it. And well, the only way we know that he took a loan is just because he said so and he says that he paid it. That's a pesh also, that's pure logic. The same goes for shvichas domem yehereg val yavam. Every decent person would understand, how could you take another person's life to save your own life? I mean, ma'echet teisa. These are logical svaras, and a svara that comes from pure logic is min haTorah. But also la'odam she'ena b'yodem alei b'rayvach is an ethical value. It's morality. It's not logic. It's your heart. It's a Yiddish heart that says, how could we derive pleasure of this world without thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu? But that is not the svara that comes purely from your logical mind, but from your neshama, from your heart, from your conscience, from your moral compass. Those svaras are not necessarily min haTorah. That is the difference between svari, osalodem she'anim yonam ezeh brocha, and the other three sources that I quoted in Shas. On the other hand, I would say this. Svaras min haTorah, but it depends. What do you want to do with this svara? What do you want to learn from this svara? A din, you could learn from svara, and that's min haTorah. A mitzvah, no. Eila hadvarim, ein hanovi rashai lachadish davar miyato. And just like a novi can be machadish a mitzvah, eila hadvarim, taryag, bal toisefu bal tigra. We got 630 mitzvahs, aleim ein lahoisef umehem ein legroa, taryag. And just like a prophet can't be machadish a new mitzvah, neither could chachamim. So in the other three sources, we're not dealing with a new mitzvah. We're not dealing with a new value, bein adam lamokim. We're dealing with dina momenis. We're dealing with halachas. We're dealing with fundamentals. And dine nemonu sapesha yosa, dina momenis, hamoitze mechaveroi, yehereg val yaver. But if we want to be machadish, berchas anahanin, that's a mitzvah. And we do not have the authority to be machadish new mitzvahs. If it would be min haTorah, the Torah would say so, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu would give us an explicit command. So maybe that is the difference between the three sugyas in which we find svara min haTorah, and our sugya in which the Gemara says svara, but still min derabanan. So these two svaras might be, in amkus and oimik hadvorim, might be similar, but I think it's two different approaches and two different yesodis and two different expressions. Why Berchas Hanan is midarabanan, even though we find in three different sugis in Shas, that svara is minatayr. Now I would like to address the question of what is the svara? What is the svara of Asa la'adam sheyehena v'yolam hazeh b'li bracha? So when we say that a person doesn't have the right to partake of any hanoah of this world without saying a bracha, and we explain this to the Rabbanon, is it a mitzvah aseh derabanan or an isur derabanan? On one hand, the lashon of Chazal is asur. Asur la'adam sheyehena v'yolam hazeh b'li bracha. Is it an isur or is it more of a kum v'aseh? So the Gemara says, so that would sound like an issa. That would sound as if saying, you don't have the right to be nana miyolam hazeh b'li bracha, and if you do so, you're a goslin. You took something you were not entitled to take. You have no right to be nana miyolam hazeh b'li bracha. But Rashi is profound. So this sugi is a brochas lamed hey amud aleph, but it goes up lamed hey amud beis, and Rashi says, "Kilu goizel asamukam es berchasai." What you stole and what you kiviyochel deprived HaKadosh Baruch Hu of is not the sandwich. It's not the apple or the peach. It's not the candy or the chocolate. It's not that you took away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the bracha. You owe him a bracha, and you deprived him of the bracha. What you stole is not the hanoah, but rather the bracha. So I think Rashi's understanding is, it's not an isur. The chefze de isura is not the hanoah. It's your lack of appreciation, your lack of a korosatayv. You are entitled to partake and to enjoy the world. That is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. There's an amazing Yerushalmi at the end of Kiddushin. An amazing Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says that a person is osed litnus adin for any fruit that he saw and he did not enjoy, any hanoah v'olam hazeh that he didn't enjoy, osed litnus adin. And that's an amazing Yerushalmi. How do we understand this Yerushalmi? There are two different interpretations. One mahalach is just a technicality. On every new fruit, you say a shechiyanu. So why didn't you take advantage? You saw a new fruit you didn't eat before. So why didn't you take advantage to say a bracha, to say a shechiyanu? I think most of the Meforshim in Yerushalmi, this is their interpretation. And when I say Meforshim Yerushalmi, I primarily mean the two achronim, the Pnei Moshe and the Kormeda and the Charedim, which on brachas we have the Peresh Charedim and Yerushalmi, because to our dismay, we feel a terrible lack. We don't have the Rishonim, we don't have Rashi and Tosfos and all the other great Rishonim on the Yerushalmi. But I think this approach was somewhat unreasonable, because then it should have been stressed that we're dealing only with a new fruit once a year. That's the din of Shechiyanu. I think what Yerushalmi means is, yes, for whom did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create this wonderful world, this beautiful world, this amazing world? So there are two approaches, Chachmei HaMusar, throughout the ages. Some would say, this entire world is no more than a nesoyin, a challenge. So all the pleasure that this world has to offer is just for you to overcome. It's just to overcome. It's all nisyonis. You're not meant to enjoy this world at all. You've come here just to learn and to daven. And your tzitzis and your tefillin, that is your fulfillment. All the rest the world has to offer is only nisyonis. Many people quote Rav Shamson of Fall Hirsch I just don't like this quote. And when I don't like something, I prefer not to believe it than to, I don't want to diminish the admiration I have to Gedolim. But some people quote Reb Shamson from Hirsch that a person after Me'av Esrim comes up to the heavens, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will ask him, did you enjoy my beautiful Alps? I don't like this word. Well, I enjoy the Alps. Almost every summer I spend time there teaching Torah. So Baruch Hashem, I always have justification for leaving Eretz Yisrael. Every time I go to Chutz La'aretz, it's primarily to teach Torah. Sometimes it's for Chizuk Torah as well, but it's primarily, first and foremost, Harbotzes Torah. So every summer I usually go. Last summer I was in South Africa, but usually I spend time in the Alps, and they are beautiful. But I don't think HaKadosh Baruch Hu will demand from a person, why didn't you go to see the Alps? I think HaKadosh Baruch Hu will ask, did you see the beauty of my Eretz Yisrael, of my beautiful land, of my holy land? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will ask us, did you visit Svas? Did you visit Feria? Did you visit Yerushalayim, Yira Kodesh, or every other little town and hamlet in Eretz Yisrael, which is full of Kedusha? So the Ameruim came to Eretz Yisrael. They bowed down, they kneeled down to kiss the rocks and stones of Eretz Yisrael. But anyway, let's come back to the Yerushalmi. So one approach would be, all this wonderful world has to offer is for you not to partake from. It's all a challenge, it's all nisyonis. Stay away. Another approach, and I think that is primarily the approach of the Baal Shem Tov and his great disciples. No, it is for you. It's not reasonable that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created all this to abstain from. It is for you. Enjoy the world, but when you do so, thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And whatever the world has to offer is here just to bring you closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to ingrain in you more Koras HaTov. It's not just to overcome. Partake from the world. Enjoy. But it all should bring you closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are human. We are human. And we have bodies and not only neshamas and sensations. And we need to partake from this world with moderation. Everything dictated by halacha goes without saying, but primarily to bring us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is the opinion of the Yerushalmi. There might be other chazals differently, that's legitimate. But this Yerushalmi says, Osad Odom Litnasadin, you didn't enjoy the world, so you should have enjoyed the world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created. For whom did he make this wonderful world? For others, not for his precious and beloved children? Yes, enjoy. But thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for each and every ounce, for each and every moment. So coming back to our sugya, this went on too long. I forgot where I was, how I got here. So coming back to Osara Odom Sheyahen Amiyolim Azeh Beli Brocha. Goizel Esamokim, Rashi says, Goizel Esamokim is Berchosoi. You could enjoy, eat, drink, but how could you forget to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu? That's the Gzeila. But the Marsha has another interpretation. The Marsha says, no, Goizel es hahanoah. You're not allowed to touch the world. You're not allowed to enjoy anything until you said the bracha. And if you didn't say the bracha, it's also. So according to Marsha's interpretation, the world is a chefze de isura, and the heter is the bracha. A moshel bederech rechoika, definitely bederech rechoika. The mitzvah of shchita. If you eat meat without shchita, it's nevela. Shchita is matio. If you eat peretz etzesol without tumas amaises, it's tevel. If you're mafresh tumas amaises, it's matio. So according to the Marsha's understanding, berachas anahanan is a matio. The world is also. But if you say a bracha, that is the matio. Rashi's approach is a different one. So according to Rashi, berachas anahanan is more of a mitzvah say, a kumva say. According to the Mashal, it fits in better with the lashon of the Gemara. Osur la'adam sheyahenim yonim zabri locha. And I think there are two Rashis l'shitosai and three different Marshas l'shitosai dealing with this fundamental question. How do we understand the svara of Osela Odom Shianim Yolim Hazeh B'li Brocha? So in Brochas Daf Nun Aleph, the Gemara says, so if a person ate without a bracha, what should he do? And the Gemara says, Misha ochel shum v'reichoi noidev, yachza v'yoichel shum v'yahei reichoi noidev. Well, you had one Isser, you got to do it again. And there are two different pshatim, Rashi and the Marsha. So Rashi's understanding of Brochas Nun Aleph is, person ate and he forgot to say a bracha and he finished eating. The question of the Gemara is, could he say the bracha now? Well, everybody agrees you need to say the bracha before you're partaking of food or drinks. But if you didn't, could you say the bracha after you finished eating? And the Gemara says, Misha ochel shum v'reichoi noidev, yachsa v'yochel shum v'yehei reichoi noidev. So Rashi explains, so you were over on one Isser, you didn't say a bracha. And now you're going to say a bracha of a Torah? That's another Isser. That's Rashi's pshat. The Marsha and that same sugya offers a different pshat. And the Marsha says, Ochel b'li bracha, what could he do now? Should he stop eating in the middle and say a bracha before he continues to eat? Or, well, you started eating with the bracha, you might as well finish. And the Gemara says, of course he should stop where he is, say a bracha before he takes another bite. And that is what the Gemara means, Misha ochel shum v'reichoi noidev, yachza v'yochel shum v'yehei reichoi noidev. Of course, stop in your tracks and make a bracha. I think the Gemara's response is more logical according to the Mashal, but the question is more logical according to Rashi. According to the Mashal, what's the Havamina? What's the Havamina that if you started eating with your bracha, you could finish your meal without a bracha? What's the Havamina? Hard to understand. But the response of the Gemara according to Mashal is very logical because it's shum and once again shum. So according to Mashal, it's the same Aveda once again. According to Rashi, it's Misha ochel shum v'reichoi noidev, yochel snon v'yehei reichoi noidev. It's another Isser. That's the Isser of Lahenes b'li brocha, and that's the Isser of a brocha levatala. But Rashi and the Marsha are both l'shitosam. So according to the Marsha, the bracha is a matir. So it doesn't make sense at all to say a bracha after you've finished eating, because the bracha is a matir. You can't be mafish tumsamaisis after you ate tevel, and you can't shecht after you ate meat. So if the bracha is a matir, the bracha must necessarily be before you start eating. But according to Rashi, that the bracha is an expression of a korsatoiv. B'li bracha, his aveda is not the hanoah. His aveda is the fact you didn't say a bracha. So there would be a havamina that a person could say the bracha. If you didn't say it before, at least say it after. So a person sneaked into the stadium and he didn't buy a ticket. And when he's leaving the stadium, he has remorse and he has a guilty conscience. So he says, I want to pay now for a ticket. So he deserves a little slap on the face, but it's nice that at least the diavad you come and say, you want to pay. So according to Rashi, the Isser, Anahena miyolam hazeh b'li bracha, is the Isser is you didn't thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You should have thanked HaKadosh Baruch Hu before starting, but at least you're giving your thanks and you're expressing your gratitude b'diavad. Actually, the B'si Yosef Simon Kuf Nun Beis brings an opinion of the Rishonim that the Yevid person could say a bracha after eating. And we find a similar machlokes by Berchas HaMitzvah. So, both in Sukkah and Psuchim Dav Zayin, the Gemara says, Tzorech levorech oiva l'asiyosan. On every mitzvah, you need to say the bracha before performing a mitzvah. But the Rosh, the beginning of Masechet Chulin, the Rosh brings an opinion that b'diavad, if you didn't say the bracha before the mitzvah, you could say the bracha after the mitzvah. And the Viseisa brings a similar opinion regarding Berchas HaNanin. But the Yesod Shel Dover, I think that Rashi and the Marsha are shitosam in the very basic way we understand The svara of Osa la'odam shi'ahena mi'olam hazeh b'li bracha. So I said, Rashi is l'shitose twice, but the Mashal is l'shitose 3 times, and that brings us to brachas Yud Beis. Posach b'dechamra v'sayim b'deshichra. That's a boya deloy ifshata and brachas daf Yud Beis. So a person said, Baruch to Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, and he thought there's wine. And at the end, it's not wine, it's beer, it's schnapps, it's vodka, it's whiskey, it's something else. So after he said, Baruch to Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, with the intention of being Messiah, boya priyagofen, he actually finished the bracha in a proper way. Shakal yibedvorim, but the Gemara has an aboya, was he yoitz or not? And Toises brings a machlokes. What is the halacha? According to the Rif, sofet brachas lahakal, and he should not say another bracha. He just rings sofet brachas lahakal. According to the Ri, he does say a bracha, but Toises doesn't explain what's the issue. Why wouldn't we say sofet brachas lahakal? Rabbi Kiva Gil in Shas and brachas Yud Beis quotes the Marsha in Psochim Kuf Beis. The Marsha says, by Berchas Ananin, we don't say Sofek Brachas Lokar because it's a Sofek Isur. It's a Sofek Isur. So you can't say Sofek Brachas Lokar. Sofek Brachas Lokar is by Berchas HaMitzvah, by Berchas HaShevach, by Berchas HaTfilah. We say Sofek Brachas Lokar. But how could you paskin for a person to eat when it's a question, did he say a bracha or not? It's an Isur. Doesn't have the right to partake of this food. And that's Mashal Shitose, because according to Rashi, there's no Isser in eating. Just a question, do you need to say a bracha or not? And whenever we have a question, do we need to say a bracha or not? Sofek brachas lahakal. So my feeling would be that's the machlokes between the Rif and the Ri. So the great Rishonim, we found the base av to the machlokes in between Rashi and the Mashal, the 2 different interpretations, and it's an afkam and aloch alamaisa. Do we say by Berchas Anan Sofek Brachas Lakul? According to Rashi, would be logical to say yes. The question is, do you need to say a bracha or not? And that is the opinion of the Rif. Maybe the Ri would be a source to the Marsha, and that is the svor of the Marsha. By Berchas Anan, it's a Sofek Yisrael. But I still don't understand this shitta, because even if it is a Sofek Yisrael, but it's a Sveike Darabanan, and Sveike Darabanan Lekula. So regardless whether it's a Mrs. Aseh or a Lo Taseh, Sveike Darabanan Lekula. So why would it make a difference how we interpret? After all, Berchas Anan are Midarabanan. So the Mashal Shitose in 3 different sources and 2 Rashis, and this is a very interesting discussion, and we could go on and on. This is a fascinating sugya. So there's a machlekes between the Taz and the Prima Godim, and I actually quoted that there's a machlekes between the Rashba and the Ritva, Brachas Lamed Hey. Does this svara, Osela Odem Shiane Me'olam Hazeh B'li Bracha, also refer to bracha achroina? Because the Gemara doesn't deal with the question, how do we know bracha achroina? Berchas wasn't the Uraisa. But what about Alamechim and Boyin Nefashos? Brachas Me'en Shalish. So the Taz says that this svara refers to bracha achroina as well. Prima Godim wonders why. And that's the machlekes Rashba and Ritva in our sugya, brachas lamed hey. So according to Rashi, what's the difference bracha Rishona, bracha achroina? It's not enough to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu before. You need to once again thank Him after. Just like the Gemara says, both in Brachas Adam and Bava Basra. We learn from Moshe Rabbeinu, Lo'olam yisadoram shvocha shel mokom v'yachar kach yispanol. First say divrei shevach, then bakoshes rochem. And before you leave, Gimal achronis are ke'eved shekiber pras marabah. And he says, thank you. So, according to Rashi, it's logical to argue that this svara dictates not only bracha rishona but also bracha achroina. But according to the Mashal, that wouldn't make sense, because if the essence of the bracha is a matia, then As I explained before, it's only relevant before you eat and not after. So that is a machlokes between the last one. Before we say goodbye today, I want to relate to a different aspect of the pandemic we are in. It's tragic. It's tragic. I forgot to dedicate today's shir to a very dear friend, and I'm mamish terribly distressed. This morning I heard that Dr. Sholem Bookbinder from Teaneck passed away from corona. I don't know whether any of you knew him, but such a special person, such a beautiful family, the Bookbinders from Teaneck. So their children are my Talmidim. They have 2 boys presently learning in Torah's Chaim, and I give a shir every Friday to those wonderful boys in the great yeshiva. So Dr. Sholem Bookbinder was such a special person, such an honor, such a wonderful Bal Midah, such an edel person. And he and his wife are both physicians. So tragic, and I am so profoundly sad. But we know many people that passed away from this pandemic. And probably you, each and every one of you knows many people. And we are mitztayr b'tzarosan shel Yisod. So I've been talking a great deal about our fundamental obligation to take extreme measures to prevent the spread of disease. But we also cannot neglect the ruchniistic aspect. We believe in Hashgacha Pratis. So just like any other endeavor in our lives, whether it's parnos or medicine, you need to do ishtadlus. We're not angels in the heavens. We are people on this world, a world that is dictated by cause and effect, by laws of nature, laws of economics, laws of every area. So yes, that is the choivus ishtadlus. And the Ramban already explains. It's not only Rishus, it's a chayva. Not only for the doctor, but for the patient as well. But on the other hand, we are maminim b'nei maminim, and we believe in Hashgacha Pratis, and we believe everything is min Hashem. What could we do to prevent the spread of this disease? What could we do to bring upon us Rachamei Shamayim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should stop this and take it all away? In 1 second, he could take it all away. Is there anything more we could do? We could daven, we could learn. But I want to speak about brachas, berachas anahanan. One of the greatest gulas is Mea brachos b'kol yom. So we are a generation that loves gulas, but to my dismay, the stranger the gulas are, the more esoteric they are, the more appeal they have to us. People will run after strange gulas, the real word ones. And we don't understand that the most important gulas are the ones we find in Chazal and in the great Poskim. Al shulchanam anu yoshvim, es lachmam anu oichlem, es meimeyam anu shoisem, umapiyam anu chayim. So the real concrete ones are the ones we find in Chazal and in the great Rishonim. And the Tur brings in Siman Mem Vav, in the name of Rav Natronai Goin, one of the great Goinim, that in the days of David HaMelech, there was a terrible plague, and 100 people died every day. And it was Nizgala LeDavid HaMelech Beruach HaKodesh that we need to say Mea Brachas to salvage and save those 100 people that died every day. And when David instituted Mea Brachas B'Kol Yom, the plague stopped immediately. So Mea Brachas B'Kol Yom is a segula that we find in Tur, quoting the Goinim. It actually has a source in Medrash. And the Beis Yosef has a list in Siman Mem Vav, and I strongly urge you to learn the Beis Yosef. He compiles a list of Mea Brachas B'Kol Yom. Sometimes we're missing some brachas, especially now that so many people daven b'yechidus and they don't have chazos hashatz. So the way to fill in the list is Berchas HaNehenen. So take advantage. Take advantage. Berchas HaNehenen are so important. They are the most basic aspect of Kabbalah's Oil Malchus Shemayim. And I strongly urge everyone to make a point and invest in avodas nefesh, kavana beberchas HaNehenen. Because we actually eat and drink all day. Depends on the climate, depends where you are, but people eat and drink all day, especially now that we know the importance of drinking water, not to be dehydrated. So, but usually we say berchas HaNehenen without much kavana, because it's just out of routine. We're used to saying brachas since we're 5 years old, so you don't even think about it. And sometimes you stand there with a cup of water in your hand and you wonder, did I say a bracha or not? I'm embarrassed to say, but almost every week in the middle of my Shia Thursday night, I ask the people, I have a cup of water and ask, did I say a bracha or not? Did I drink or not? I don't remember whether I drank at the beginning of the Shia or not. So if you are really diligent about kavona beberchas HaNehenen and you are an oived Hashem kol hayom. So we all try to do our best in davening shachas mincha malev. Definitely when we say posek rishon shel kriya shema. We all have great kavona in the Yomim Tovim when we eat matzah and moroyim. I once asked a very interesting question. Which bracha do you say with greater kavana? Berchas Ilonois Chodesh Nisan or Berchas HaTorah every day in the morning? Well, the answer is obvious. Of course, Berchas Ilonois. Once a year, you take your kids, you walk 3 blocks to a yard where there are 2 atzei pri. It's a ceremony. It's once a year. Berchas HaTorah, you get up in the morning, you're still fashlofen, you're still kragi, you're still half asleep, but you start thinking and learning. So you need to say Berchas HaTorah first thing in the morning. So you don't really usually have proper kavanah. But Berchas HaTorah is the most important of brachas. Both of Bo Matzian and Adon Peyalaf Almo of the Ha'oret Shaloi Bochu B'Torah Tchilo. Berchas Alonis is a Berchas Rishus. It's not even a chiyuv. But that's human nature. What you say once a year, you have tremendous kavanah. But Berchas HaTorah is part of your daily routine. You get up in the morning, you say Berchas HaTorah. But that is what makes you an Oived Hashem. I once said a pshat, and I think it's emes lamita. V'hoyu ekev tishma'un. V'shomer Hashem elokecha lachu es habris v'sachesed. And all the blessings in the world, the utopian existence of happiness and bliss. Rashi says, mitzvah she'odem dash ba'akeva, mitzvah skalis she'odem dash ba'akeva. So one wonders, if it's mitzvah skalis she'odem dash ba'akeva, why do we deserve such unbelievable sachar, reward? And I say, mitzvah skalis she'odem dash ba'akeva. What is this expression, she'odem dash ba'akeva? Chaz v'sholom, it shouldn't be an expression of bezoyan. You don't trample on mitzvahs. No one tramples on any mitzvah. So what's mitzvahs? Kallah shodem dash be'akeva. I think those are the easy mitzvahs to perform because it's part of your routine. It's not difficult at all to say berchas HaNehenen. It's the easiest thing in the world. But as easy it is to perform, it is difficult to have kavanah. Those are the mitzvahs kallah shodem dash be'akeva, just like you walk. So when you walk from one room to the other, you don't need to plan your walk. When you get on a motorcycle, it demands concentration. When you sit into the cockpit of a private train, it demands extreme concentration. But when you walk, you don't need to concentrate. Don't even think about walking. When you lift one foot and you put it down and then the other. It's routine. It's automatic. Those are the mitzvahs, Kallah she'odem doish be'akeva. But those are the ones that ultimately define, are you an Oived Elokim or not? So Birchas Hanahanan tops the list. This is so, so important. So before you say a shahakal, think about it. Who gave you this water? Who sustains your life? Think about all the generations in the past in which people starved from hunger and they died from thirst. Let your memory go back 80 years in Auschwitz and Birkenau and all those camps, not the death camps, the living that were starved. They died from dehydration and from malnutrition and from hunger and from thirst. Thank you for the abundance that we have in our time. We have so much to thank for. It's unbelievable, but we don't. Mitzvahs Kallah she'odem doish be'akeva, it's just routine. So I want you to appreciate Birchas Hanahanan. They are more important than anything else. Birchas Hanahanan will define, are you an Oived Elokim from morning to night? So today we learned the lamdas of Birchas Hanahanan, but this is a feeling that I must share with you. So I really encourage everyone, dedicate some time, 30 days, 40 days, try to concentrate on Birchas Hanahanan. Never take a sip of water without really thinking, looking at this cup and say, how much do we need to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for his chasadim, for letting us partake, for this age of abundance, this age of plenty. No one is hungry. No one dies from thirst. And if you really have kavanah by Birchas Hanahanan, that is the ultimate Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shamayim, and that is the ultimate Avodas Elokim. So I think I've been going over time. So once again, it's a pleasure to be with you. So I don't know. I need to speak to the Shlomo Gottesman, my dear friend. So when this pandemic will be over, it's a pity that we shouldn't see each other once a week and learn Torah. So this is not an obligation. I didn't promise this. I didn't take it upon myself. I'm just saying I greatly enjoy this Sunday evening shiur. And I want to wish all of you, es asher yeshnoi poi ves asher einenoi poi. You should only know good health, you and your families, and we should hear no more besoides Eoiv. We should only hear besoides toivus and Yeshuas and Achamois. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should take this all away. He could take away in one moment. He's a Kali Yachol. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should take this away. We should only share besoides toivus. And we should be zoicha bekorav biyumeinu to a Yeshua Seilamim and to be as Goyal Tzedek, be as Moshiach Tzedkeinu b'mheru v'yumeinu. Amen. Keep it up and have a wonderful day. Kol Tov.